Welcome to Shell Games, everybody. This is Games, which is basically a monthly book clubbish thing where we have a presenter who presents a game that they like or don't like and tells us why they like it or they don't like it. And today we have Space King himself, Dave Bennett, presenting Stellaris.
Yeah.
So let's hear about it.
All right. So yeah, Stellaris. Stellaris is a game that came out pretty recently. It was actually released in May of this year, and it is a 4X, what they call grand strategy sci-fi game. And so I'll define these terms in a second. So what is 4X? It's usually turn-based, high-level strategy games at a large scale. And the 4X's actually describe what you'll be mostly doing in the game. So exploring, expanding, exploiting resources, and then exterminating your enemies. And
Why isn't it 4E?
Look.
Seriously.
Look, 4E doesn't sound as good. I think maybe it's a conflict between E3 and 4E, or maybe it's like...
Yeah, they should have just called it E4.
E4, yeah, nailed it. Anyway, for whatever reason, it is 4X. And there are also other subsystems in these games, like diplomacy and researching technology, but they are usually all in service of achieving those goals.
Exploitive diplomacy?
Sure, yeah, you're exploiting your allies, I guess. Or exploiting friendship in the nice way. I don't know. We'll just keep going. But just kind of as an aside, I really like these kinds of games. These are all just kind of a smattering of games. There are a lot more than this, and these are the ones I like. Except for Master of Orion 3, that's actually the first game that broke my heart. Like, that was the first game that taught me that hype is a thing that can break your heart. Because it was like, oh, it's like Master of Orion 2, but way better, because it's bigger and more awesome. It was not. It was worse in every way. And as a matter of fact, Master of Orion 2 was my introduction to this genre, and the guys that made this actually coined the term 4X. So it's like, hey, we're making these kinds of games. What are you doing in it? Oh, you're doing these kind of 4 actions. It's a 4X game. And this is kind of like, at least for a lot of people that I know and that I talk to about these kind of games, this is kind of the either benchmark or like the watershed moment when these games came out. I was like, oh man, this is the game that everyone holds them up against when they're trying to make their own 4X game. Now Paradox, these guys they don't usually make 4X games. And when they were talking about making a 4X game, it was kind of weird, because usually they don't make 4X games, they make grand strategy games, or what they self-title grand strategy. So yeah, there it is. And these games are kind of like, so examples of these are Crusader Kings 2, Hearts of Iron 4, and Europa Universalis, these are all like long-running series of these games. And they're really complicated. And so this is Crusader Kings 2, and every minor player is simulated. So like you have the entirety of medieval Europe being simulated down to each individual barony, and you are like controlling large nations or countries, or you're just you're some guy in Ireland doing his own thing, just trying to make a living. And they strive they're kind of like more on the simulation side of these kind of games, and it's very dense. Europa Universalis is kind of about like discovering the new world and establishing trading posts and stuff like that. So you want to become the conqueror of the new world through economic or military means. Again, similarly, lots of small nation states all being simulated by the AI. You have to interact with them, figure out how you want to do this over an incredibly long term. And then, or you can do this where you make your own countries and you figure out who wins.
We all do.
Yeah. But, so in looking up what grand strategy means, they keep throwing this term around, but I had a hard time finding them actually defining it in concrete terms. And so based off of what I could kind of put together from forum posts and just random posts from the developers, grand strategy is a game that covers diplomatic, technological, and economical aspects over an incredibly long period of time. It's almost dynastic. So it's like, I will be playing the King of England from, 1583 to whenever I die. And the thing about these games is that the nation will persist even if your character dies. Like, it's almost about making the lineage from era to era. So it's like, oh, I died, so now my son is king. But my son has all these bad qualities, and I don't want him to be king. So I'm going to try to assassinate my eldest son so that my younger son, who is much better, a better ruler, will become the new king. And so you're you're making your own worst enemies, and you're trying to basically set up machinations to, overthrow yourself so that you can have the best possible chance of continuing.
For the good of the kingdom.
Yeah, for the good of the kingdom. Yeah, it's very much like this long-term game that you're trying to play. They also, again, have an emphasis on simulating not only the major players but the smaller ones as well. Everyone from giant countries to the individual tiny nation states, and then it's sort of real time but not. You can pause it at any time. There are turns, or it's like every month is a turn, but you can pause it at any time. So it's basically turn-based, but you're kind of watching this unfold in real time.
Are there any examples where it's not, they don't have that sort of turn-based?
So there's Star Drive and Sins of a Solar Empire. They're kind of like they all kind of live on this, I don't know, tick-based thing. So it's like, oh, you're managing units in real time and watching them fly around, but resource gains and events will trigger on these kind of set time intervals. And yeah, so when these guys that made this huge, complicated games came on stage wearing this hat, talking about, hey, we're going to make the next great 4X game. It's going to be the next Space 4X grand strategy game. It sounded pretty neat, because I really liked the idea of those games, but every time I've tried to play them, it was really complicated. But maybe now that it's in space, I'll be like, okay, I will put in the effort to try to learn how to do this. It also sounds like they knew what was wrong with the previous ones about like how complicated they were. So they were very much trying to not make it dumbed down, but a lot more approachable. And so, so it's basically they were selling it like Master of Orion plus Crusader Kings is Stellaris, and that sounds friggin' cool. And I'm like really excited. And is it full of stars? It's pretty cool. I defined a bunch of terms that would like require definition, so I kind of bring it back to redefine what the game is. It's a game where you attempt to survive in a large galaxy by gathering resources and interacting with other AI factions. Use those resources to build ships, colonize planets, expand your empire through force, guile, or friendship. And then these resources could include influence, which is like gained through interacting with other empires, and you need to do that to expand your borders. You need minerals to build stuff. Energy is basically cash money, so you need it to either buy things or maintain your armies and fleets and planets and stuff. Food makes your population grow, which lets you do more stuff because you have more people, which make more resources. And then there are research, which you need to learn new techs, which let you get more of this stuff faster and better, and more guns and shoot better stuff. And then there's 3 sub-branches of that. And then there's also just many unique one-off resources that you find through research. So it's like, oh, we've discovered this one alien element that makes us have awesome nuclear missiles or whatever. Yeah. So, now that I've ranted about what Stellaris sort of is, I'll try to talk about why it's neat and kind of also explain some more of the like in-depth some of the systems that I really enjoy about this game. So, just kind of give you a high-level view. Creating your own race and faction is one of my favorite parts of this game. It is so deep and like, I don't know, depth-filled. It's so filled with depth that you can make basically endless numbers of races, and it feels awesome. They all feel unique and cool. This game also has really cool events and narrative, which is something I never look for in 4X games. So it was a very nice surprise. And then just the sense of scope and awe, and what they keep throwing around the term grand strategy, but I think they deserve it, and I'll kind of explain that. And then just the look and feel of the game is just sweet. So let's start with creating races and factions. Yeah, it's like when we get to the scope part, like you will see that. All right, so creating races and factions. You have many options at your disposal, so you can really create the species that you want. It also gives you, and like you can do that to make the best race possible for one specific thing, or you can make it as a kind of an opt-in challenge to be like, I'm going to pick the worst things and see how I do, or I'm going to pick the, it's like, how do I work around my flaws? Do I have any flaws? Or do I, it's like, I'm going to be a warlike species that wants to make peace, and let's see how that goes. So kind of as an example, so kind of walk you through like how this works, I will show you like most of the options and like with an example race that I made just for this. So it's like, all right, we're gonna make a race. When you start off, you get to pick what you look like, and this is just purely appearance kind of stuff. What species are you? What's your portrait look like? Doesn't affect your stats or anything. So all right, let's go with this penguin-looking dude. It's kind of neat.
Fungoid?
Yeah, no, you can be like this weird fungus person, or just like a mushroom. All right, so then once I picked what he looks like, I was like, I gotta figure out what they're named. So I went with the Penguini because he looks like a penguin, and then his adjective is penguinish because it's gonna come up, and like all these things are things that will start coming up as you like interact with other species. Like, oh, this is a penguinish fleet. This is the Penguini homeworld. You make your little biography. This is just a flavor thing where I wrote, take these broken space wings, I'm going to fly in space. It's really stupid. And then you start picking your racial traits. And each of these have stat benefits and like penalties. And so you can kind of see here that you have like a number of trait points that you have to spend as a currency, as well as a maximum number of traits you can pick. So there's stuff like charismatic, where I become more friendly with other races, or I'm repugnant and it's really hard for me to talk to other races. Conformists, they just love hanging out with each other, like they're kind of there for the greater good, so they're kind of like safety in numbers, they're happy together. Or they're deviants and they like to, have slaves and stuff like that. Like it's really like you really define the personality of your species with these traits. So for the purposes of this, I made them thrifty, so they're good with money. They're communal, so they're just generally happier because they have kind of a very happy communal lifestyle. But they're very physically weak. So if they're going to engage in war on land, they are very bad at it. So because the birds, they like to fly and they don't want to land on the ground. So I did that. Now that I've picked those traits, I'm making my ruler. And so this is the first person that will rule my empire in space. So I named her Squawk and Awe, because I don't know. The ruler title for this faction is Bird Brain. So great Bird Brain, Squawk and Awe. And then you just get a bunch of color variants and clothes. And these portraits are all animated too. They're like very subtly animated, which is both cool and kind of creepy. Then moving on. What kind of homeworld do they live on? I guess it's a desert homeworld because they like flying and there's, gusts of hot air. We'll go with that. Homeworld name is Beak with an apostrophe because it's space. Star name is Aviona. We'll go from there. Oh, and another note about this, based on the starting homeworld, it kind of determines what worlds are habitable to them, and it's based off of proximity to the desert. So this is, I think, either arid or just Terran. So it's like, Earth-like planets are fine, arid planets are fine, but ocean-filled planets are the worst. So are winter planets. So it's like, hey, everything that's opposite from me are like basically hostile planets to me. But again, ideal worlds for this race are desert worlds. Now, I know this looks like the other screen, but this is different. I made my species traits. Now I'm picking my government's ethics. I've defined what the birds are. I forgot what I called them. The penguini are. But now I need to define what their government codes of ethics are. And you get this tree. They're diametrically opposed. So you can't take one or the other. And it determines, based off these choices, what governments you can pick. So, for example, militarists. These guys like to go to war. So they're good, and each choice has stat bonuses and penalties based on what you pick. So if they're militaristic, they can have more rivals, they do more damage, and they love it when they're at war. But at the same time, people don't trust you because you're militaristic, so it's really hard to make peaceful accords. So for this example, I decided to go with militaristic because they're kind of hawkish. And, yeah, thank you. And then they're a bunch of bird nerds, so they're fanatic materialists, so they're really good at science. So they're scientific but warlike. And because I picked these two choices, these government options open up. So like this bottom row is kind of like, hey, these are basic options for anyone. But in these middle row, we kind of got, we have a different type of democracy, we have a science directorate, and then we have an imperial hegemony, which is, I think, what I went with, despotic hegemony. So they're all about, hey, we are the best and the smartest, and we only pick the best and smartest guy to rule us. And he will be basically a dictator until he dies, passing it on either to his kin, or if there is no clear heir, they will be elevated from the army. And so they're all about making war and doing it as scientifically as possible. And again, each of these governments give you different bonuses to like let you focus on what your empire is good at or bad at. So they're good at building research speeds, and they build space stations. So basically, they will do science at any cost, as fast as possible. So I did that. Now I gotta name the empire. So it's the Penguini Imperium. Sure. Now I gotta pick my flag. It's got feathers. That's neat. It's orange and black. That's cool. All right. What missiles do they start with? I guess we're gonna go with missiles because you pick like what weapon do they take to space with them? They like missiles because they fly. How do they travel around? Warp travel, hyperspace travel, wormholes. They're nerds, so they'll probably take wormholes because that sounds hard. And now after picking all these damn choices, including other ones I didn't show here, I've made my race. And in this list of all these races, there are other, these are other dudes. So you get to the game, it's like, all right, great. You get this neat little starting paragraph about, hey, in the eon since you started as the Penguini, blah, 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 because I'm scientific, they are very hard, and despite our rapid progression through the technological ages, as a species, we were fragmented and inefficient. And so all the phrasing that you get from this game is basically changed by these choices. And so it's like, all right, we get that you are angry bird nerds. We will feed you text to kind of reinforce that theme. And just as other examples, we have these cool collectivist militarists. So they are really all about the greater good and killing dudes. And they're lizard people. They're really strong and talented, but they don't want to go to their planets. These guys are weird mushroom people that are all about being part of the greater good, but they need to do it peacefully. They don't want to go to war. They're funguses. They can't do it. They're good at money. They're communal, but they're slow breeders. So they don't grow they take a while to grow up and breed new guys. So like each one is very valuable. Each population unit is very valuable. So this is actually one of the harder choices to make. Or you can be a human. That's fine. Whatever. These guys are like the Star Trek Federation. They're really friendly. And we're humans, so we're quick learners and nomadic because we're great. But we're also xenophilic and we're individualists because we like our freedoms. But what I really like about this too, just because you have one species doesn't mean it has to be the same empire. On the other side of the coin, you have the Commonwealth of Man, which are still humans, which are exactly the same, but they're xenophobes and all about the military. So they just want to exterminate anything that's not human. And that's, I don't know, the fact that you can create races and have different empires. And the other note too is every race that you create, you can actually have them show up as AI characters later on. So you can see how the AI treats your creations and how they interact with you. So yeah, I really like this because it gives you the tools to create interesting, unique races, and you can see how the AI portrays your empire. It's just kind of showing you all the choices that you can make. This is the list of stuff that we just did. So yeah, you have a lot of choices, and it's really neat. All right, moving on next. Narrative and story. So I mentioned earlier on, it's like seriously, yeah, narrative and story. When going to a 4X game, this is like the last thing I'm looking for. Because usually I'm inventing my own story and narrating it in my head as it develops, which is usually around the game system. So it's like, oh, we need resource X, so the Penguini must have this. There's a great need for this thing. And so I'm kind of telling my own story as the game develops. But takes it farther and has random events that occur during play, which has opt-in risk, pays homage to various forms of sci-fi throughout the game. And in the later game, there's an overarching story that has galaxy-shaping events that's like really cool, and either you need to unite together, or make sure you're the strongest to take it on, or you all just fall apart and die. And the available choices during these events changes based off your species, ethics, and traits. I wanted to call those out because I really like that kind of thing because it's really neat. And I really think that games like that are really cool. But no, seriously, like the fact that it had these things was like, oh, that's kind of neat. We made a whole game about that. So they made a kind of micro version of that, and that's really fun to see. So it was a very pleasant surprise for me. So, for example, one of these encounters is like, oh, there's a planet that we just colonized and landed on. And it turns out there are a bunch of earthquakes, and once we investigated it turns out there's an entire other species living under there. How do we deal with this? If I'm peaceful and xenophilic, I might be able to befriend them, and then we'll just coexist on this planet. They'll live under us, and we'll live above them, it'll be fine. If I'm not so tactful with aliens, we will go to war, and they will invade my planet from underground and take the surface. And then they become an enemy faction that I need to deal with for the rest of the game. And then there's also just some randomness too, as you kind of like discover stuff with science ships. Like there's almost a roll of the dice. Like, hey, my level 4 science officer has a 20% chance of succeeding at this thing. You can succeed, fail, or critically fail, which instantly kills the scientist, usually. And yeah, it's neat. These comets. This event right here, for example, there's a comet sighted. These guys are all about these guys are xenophilic, so you can kind of see the icon for the trait next to the option. And the way they interpreted this is like, oh, this is amazing. It reminds us that we're not alone in the galaxy, and we all get excited about it. However, I've played games where, as the materialists, the scientists, they see it, and it's just a comet passed overhead. Nothing of note happened, and then the option is just acknowledged. And then I played a religious race, and they saw it, and they interpreted it as a sign of great doom. And so the entire empire was thrown into chaos because they were upset and angry that this, the sign from the heavens came up and just, ruined their day. And so sometimes it's just like, oh, you get one thing based off of the traits you have, but then you also have, eventually you can make choices that, are either grayed out or available based off of your options that you picked early in the game. And then, in terms of like the late game events, one of the coolest ones is like, somewhere in the late game after you researched a bunch of technology and met most of the galaxy, these transdimensional beings just show up and start wrecking your day. Like they just started eating empires, and the Unbidden are now Cthulian monsters that are coming through and will not negotiate with you. So you need to ally with the rest of the galaxy to try to stop it, or you're going to have a bad day. And I've lost many games where no one's like, it's fine, I don't like you anyway, so it'll be fine, it'll sort itself out. Then they just eat it, and then it just keeps going, and it's really bad. But yeah, I really like this stuff because it acknowledges the choices you made at the beginning. It makes you, again, kind of reinforces the race fantasy that you set up in the beginning. And then each tiny encounter feels like a miniature episode of Star Trek, which is definitely what we're going for, Orion Trail, so I just love that kind of crap. And then the fact that you know that something is big is coming in the late game, but you don't always know what because there's a variety of these events, gives you something to work towards and kind of like, get ready for it. And it just feels neat. All right, sense of scope and awe. So, yeah, I kind of titled this From a Single Planet to the Entire Galaxy. This game's... So, like I mentioned when we were talking about Paradox's games, one of my problems with the other titles is the overwhelming amount of information and bad on-ramping. Like, they basically don't give you a tutorial, they just throw you into those, like, Crusader Kings maps, and it's like, hey, good luck, simulate Europe. And I'm like, oh, all right, I guess I'll be Ireland.
You're Europe now.
I am Europe. Stellaris, on the other hand, does a mostly good job of unramping me to the game systems, and the complexity actually blooms out as I expand my reach across the galaxy, because they're very clear, like, hey, you start here on this one planet, learn how to do this stuff, explore your system, go out from there. And so you learn new systems as you continue growing your reach. And what I like about this is that the scale shift can be subtle as you play, but then once you go back to an earlier save or start a new game, you realize, oh man, this is like the stuff. I was spinning a lot of plates when I switched to this new character, a new race. And then it's just this constant stream of macro and micro decisions. So it ranges from where do I put this single worker on this planet so that I can get more resources, to what empire-wide government edict do I adopt so that it has the best effect for the entire empire. So just kind of like give you a miniature story of that. It's like, all right, I started on my homeworld. I got my little race dudes. I'm telling them where to go to get resources. I'm assigning them in different places. I'm building up this planet with infrastructure and stuff like that. And then I'm going to tell my science ship to explore my own solar system and find out what's really going on my planets. And so this actually uncovers events and what resources are on the different planets. And then that allows you to develop the solar system and get more resources and build it up that way. Then after you do that, it's like, yes, I did it. I've explored my solar system. Then you zoom out. You're like, oh God. All right. So I'm here. There's a lot of other stuff that I haven't found yet. So then you start kind of branching out and going to the different solar systems. And as you do that, you start meeting other aliens. And that's either, again, based off of your trait choices that you made in the beginning of the game, either a momentous moment or a horrifying moment, because you either thought that you were alone in the galaxy, or they have a different religion than you, or you are xenophobic. But you start interacting with these guys, and we'll just assume that eventually you go to war, and you have to fight dudes. So you build up your fleet, you go in these epic space battles, and you take each other out, and you claim more territory. And now you try to either integrate them in your empire, or exterminate them, or whatever way you want to handle this is. Or you reach a peace agreement where you agree to just take their planets peacefully. But now that you've done that, you now have a much larger empire that you need to manage. And at a certain point in the game, you need to... So let me back up. So when you are taking planets, a big thing about the government choices and types is that you can only directly control a certain number of planets. And at a certain point, you have to give up control to barons or governors, and you have to create star sectors. And when you create those star sectors, they're controlled by an AI leader, and they are managed for you. And so, in this example right here, like, oh, we have a bunch of different sectors that, because our empire is so big, they are handling it on their own. And you choose, like, oh, do you focus on research? Do you focus on energy? Do you focus on industry? So now you're making these giant, like, empire-affecting things, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna keep shifting this around. Things are getting pretty complicated. And I zoom out again, and I'm like, oh my God. Now I'm meeting everyone, and I realize that there's a bunch of empires doing the same thing that I'm doing right now. And I will need to figure out how to maneuver my now behemoth-sized empire into position to either make new friends, to take up more territory because I need more resources, or, you know, whatever you need. The other thing about, I'll get back to that later, because this is what they mean by grand strategy. This is a thing that, like, that growth is subtle, but it takes place over time in game, of like hundreds of years, like as you're expanding and growing. And you will either need to elect new leaders because you have a democratic society, you have a despot that died or was assassinated because no one liked them, and all the while you are trying to maintain continuity by picking new leaders that align with your personal goals as well as the goals of the people. Because the other thing that is insane about this is that even though you pick your traits and what your society is all about in the beginning, as the game goes on, there is drift. So the farther colonies away from your homeworld start changing their beliefs. And so it's about like, oh God, do I let them just become their own colony or their own thing, or do I crush them with military, or do I try to appease them and split the difference? Because these guys really like slavery, and I really don't. And they're clamoring for it. Yeah. So playing the long game, like everyone has their own personality, everyone's vying for control, and your own people, like I said, your own people can change and turn against you. And you could possibly create your own worst enemy. And this is also true through science. Like you can there are things called dangerous technologies that you can accidentally research, and it creates an AI threat now. It's like, oh, I researched AI a little too hard, and now they hate me. And so suddenly half of my empire is controlled by this new AI threat. And I'm like, oh no, okay, that's fine. We'll make this work. And then this is like the last bit. There's a lot I like about this game, but just the look and feel of it. So just the atmosphere. Like I've been playing the music, it feels all sci-fi and synthy. It feels real cool. Gets you in the space zone. But the art and the music just go a long way to help sell the fantasy. And the fact that you can zoom into each individual ship and planet, as well as zooming out to the entire galactic view, just like and it all looks great. It's just awesome. And they also just make a great use of concept art for the loading screens. So it's like, yeah, all right, I'm getting ready. I'm loading back into my game. Looking at this cool asteroid mining belt thing. Then I'm like, oh, I'm going to zoom into my planet. Because this planet, like, and as you, like, develop the planet, as people grow on it, like, more and more lights start filling up the cities and on the planet's surface, and that's amazing. Or I'm going to just slow things down and, like, oh, you sent this GIF out in the thread, and it's like, man, I forgot how cool this game could look. And so, like, there's these giant hectic battles that can speed up or slow down if I really wanted to take the time and watch it.
You control individual ships in this battle?
You do. You control fleets, and those you basically tell those fleets to go here and attack that group. But mostly, once the fleets are engaged, they engage in like a rock paper scissors kind of battle. It's like, oh, I have missiles. You don't have a thing to counter the missiles, so I'm going to do more damage. But they're all just going to duke it out. And then if you have multiple fleets, you can be like, oh, I'm going to swing around and have this fleet and join the engagement, stuff like that. So the ship customization of ship fighting part is really cool. And they actually, I'm shocked, but they don't actually go overboard with that stuff. And they do just enough so you can build and customize your ships with the weapons and loadouts. But they also make it easy enough to be like, whatever, I'm just going to auto-fit it with the thing that the computer tells me is the best to build. So, I love this game a lot, and there's a lot of cool things about it, but it also has some problems. I just wanted to call it the problems. It's really dense, still. I totally am aware of the fact that this game is systems upon systems upon systems. And while I love it, and love it dearly, it still takes a lot of work to, peer inside and, understand what the hell's going on. Because it took me my third game to realize, oh, I've been doing the entire opening moments wrong because I missed this one system that they didn't explain in the tutorial. Because there's a lot about electing leaders for planets and admirals and science officers and stuff like that. There's a whole other management aspect that they just never tell you about. They're just like, yeah, no, you'll figure it out. It's fine. And knowing that stuff from the beginning is really good to know because it makes your life a lot easier. The early to mid game is great, but the late game tends to slow down in a not fun way. So, but naturally, as you expand your empire, it gets really big and it becomes a lot slower to do stuff because you're managing all this stuff. It kind of dries up because while the encounters are great, it's kind of thin. So you start losing that really fun thing where it's oh man, I can't wait to find out what happens next. Instead, it's oh, I gotta just keep managing all these spinning plates and stuff like that. And then the only means of victory for this game right now is conquest. So even though you want to be the cool, peaceful guys, you have to dominate the galaxy. And technically you can do that by forming federations and making allies, and they're part of your crew, and then that sort of counts, but not really. So the game tends to devolve into war the later it goes on, which is too bad, because again, you make these awesome races that feel great for the first half of the game, and then it just kind of breaks apart. I'd also wish there was more visible differentiations between the empire types. A lot of this is done through the text, and so sometimes it feels very subtle, and this is totally a scope thing that I know that they couldn't do realistically at all. But at the same time, I do wish because I'm peaceful and stuff like that, my ships look like this. Instead, they have the 4 ship looks, and then you pick one of them at the beginning of the game, and that's it. And then there are many, many weird bugs because this game is nothing but systems upon systems upon systems, and they interact in ways that are not expected, and can cause you to enter states that are not great. And unless you saved, you might be in a bad way. But the good news about Paradox is that they are addressing a lot of this stuff, and they're legendary for their support of their games long term. And they do a lot of stuff of just free updates, balance passes, stuff like that. So they're actually just creating more encounters with additional content with free updates, and then they're rebalancing stuff that is either broken or just not underpowered. And they've also made a very clear roadmap of like, hey, we understand that there's no peace route for winning the game right now. This will be in this update around December. And so they've made this roadmap of like all the stuff they still want to add to the game, but they had to release it just to like make money. And so that's really exciting. But yeah, so I just gushed about this game a lot. Please, I will answer questions that you guys have about it as best I can. But this game is really exciting to me because, again, I really like 4X games. I really like space. And no game that I've played yet has managed to capture the sense of scale and awe that this game has, while also still being mostly understandable. Like, again, steep learning curve, but this is the first game where I've been able to actually climb over that cliff. And I'm like, oh, I get it. I see how the system's working. I feel like I understand this, and I'm having fun. And can I just buy into the fantasy rather than pulling my hair out about how the game works? So, yeah, thank you for listening to me gush about this game. But if you have any questions, please ask me. Yes?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, there is a win state, and that is if you conquer the entire galaxy?
Yes. It's like you need to control 85% of the galaxy.
I see.
Or something, some arbitrary percentage.
And how long, on average, does it take you to get to that point? Because it sounds like you've played it multiple times.
Yes.
You're good.
I played like 60 hours. I played over 100 hours. The longest game that I played probably 30 to 40 hours, and I wasn't even close to getting that yet. So like, you really need to commit to this goal. And after, again, the reason I never got there is because I lose interest eventually. Like, I control half the galaxy. I see my goal. I see how I need to get there. I just don't want to do it. And so it's like, all right, well, I'll just chalk that up as a win and make a new guy and see how that's different.
Is there a lose condition too? Like, can you?
Oh yeah, you get wiped out. You can get overthrown and then wiped out, and then that's it. It's like, oh, the bird people still exist, but you're not involved anymore.
What are the different galactic events? There's the one, like, Cthulhu.
Yeah, so there's the Cthulhu one. There's a extra galactic alien threat that kind of comes on and starts like mind controlling people, and so it starts changing personalities of other races, which is kind of neat. There is a group of intergalactic nomads that show up and are just like, hey, we're going to enforce our way of life now. You got to deal with it. There's also one system this game that has is really cool is the concept of fallen empires. These are empires that existed long before you knew how to fly in space, and they are basically either roadblocks or just like, this is what they do now. They exist and you can't do it. You can't deal with them until you become really powerful. So it's like, hey, this fallen empire is religious, and they have this religious homeworld that's like the perfect world to land on. But if you land on it, they will end you, or there's a scientific directorate that's like, hey, we have all this knowledge and we've hoarded it, and you can't have it. And if we catch you researching stuff like AI, we're gonna step in and intervene. Or they're gonna be really peaceful and start elevating random species and being like, hey, whatever, we're just gonna now these slugs can just be spacefarers, whatever. In one of my games, I actually found the remains of Earth, like the nuked remains of Earth, and the only species that survived were cockroaches, and then I elevated the cockroaches. And so they became the masters of bombed out Earth, which is neat. But yeah, I haven't seen all of them yet, all of the events, but those are like the 3 or 4 that I can imagine off the top of my head. But a lot, again, because the main goal of the game is conquest, you're going to get in a lot of fighting, so you either need to have a lot of allies that are good at fighting, or become good at fighting yourself. Which again is kind of a bummer. Like, I was sort of hoping that one of the options, like the singularity, you figure out how to research the singularity, and now you're in a computer, and it doesn't matter anymore. So you're great. You're the best. You're the king of science.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of these systems are just ultimately end up on a scale of how diplomatic you are versus how much of a warmonger you are.
Yeah, and there's no, like, some of the other games, like, as they got expansions and updates, they've added stuff like intrigue, or they've added more peaceful ways to, like, do things. But yeah, it is very much like, am I going to shoot the guy or am I going to talk the guy? And a lot of the meat comes from, like, the decisions leading up to those things. Like, it's like, my overarching theme is diplomacy. How am I going to make peace with the guy that absolutely wants to kill me? even though like with every attempt, like I'm giving him gifts and stuff like that and trying to be very peaceful and give him what he wants. He's like, no, I'm still gonna kill you because I'm a xenophobe and you're an alien and I hate aliens. Because I'm a weird bug monster and you're a weird bird monster and that's unnatural. So
is there any sort of sense of a resource starvation technique? Can you
Yes.
can you like embargo your enemies
Mhm.
and then they don't have the resources to fight back and they start?
Absolutely. A lot of the resources in the game are gained from building up research outposts and space stations that are like harvesting the asteroids and stuff like that. You can swoop in and just start blowing up their space stations. And if you don't have enough energy to make your thing go, the army starts leaving you, your buildings stop working, and people start starving and just getting really angry. And once people are angry, they create factions that want to overthrow the government. And if you can overthrow the government successfully, now you could possibly put in your own puppet to make them like you. And so it's kind of like, oh, I'm going to go to this really circuitous route of, killing off your resources and resource gain, and then just kind of like, hey faction, you should like me. And then it's like, okay, yeah. And then they overthrow the government, and now they're my best friends. Like, there are a lot of ways to flip opinions of you through either military or non-military means, which is pretty cool.
Do the personalities of the races really? Listening to you talk about it, it reminds me of Age of Warhammer, because all the races did have like personas. Sure. But it didn't really behave the way that it was described. But does this one? Does it feel pretty rich?
I was surprised at how well they act according to their ethics and stuff like that. What's also cool that this game does is when you meet a dude, I don't have a screenshot of this, but if you highlight, like if you talk to them and you see like, oh, these guys are these traits, and then it kind of describes their personality in like a one sentence or like a one phrase thing. It's like, they are democratic zealots. And so you mouse over that and it's like, hey, these guys love democracy but are going to enforce it in they will spread democracy through force. Which, sounds kind of familiar. The other thing, too... Fuck you. Yeah!
Fungaloids.
Fungaloids. Yeah, basically. They will spread freedom at any cost. There was also I couldn't tell if this is a bug or not, but I found species, too, that have no ethics. And they just give this spiel from Zap Brannigan from Futurama about filthy neutrals. It's like, what makes a man go neutral? What does a neutral man think? But yeah, because of the nice little descriptor that you get, it's like, okay, these guys are going to go to war to spread their way of life. Usually, they will behave the way that you expect. And a lot of games are determined by like, oh, who are my starting neighbors? I'm surrounded by 3 xenophobes. One of them's religious. One of them's a militarist. The other one's peaceful. That's great, but they're just going to be isolated. But none of them like me, so I'm like, well, okay, great. Now I'm gonna go to war.
Could you pit them against each other?
Absolutely, yeah. No, you can butter one up and then be like, hey, that guy says you suck. And because they're both xenophobes, they hate each other already, so it doesn't take much for you to, tip that domino over.
And then you just swoop in the back end and take them both over.
That's basically, many a game have been played like that.
Can you frame somebody? Can you like destroy an outpost and then like make it look like somebody else did it?
Not yet, but in Crusader Kings there are things like that. You can intentionally frame another
subterfuge.
Yeah, so like you have your spy masters. They're like, hey, go in here and blow this thing up and make it look like the French did it. So they are good at those systems. They've made this system before. They just not have made it to Stellaris yet.
I love they were successful. It didn't look like you did it, but they pinned the wrong people.
You're right.
No, this isn't the French flag. Like, uh-oh.
Now they're at war with Germany.
B plus, guys. B plus.
Hey, man. Great job. You did great. Real good. Real good.
Have you tried Sins of the Solar Empire?
I have.
That's the only type of game
Yeah, I'm trying. And, like, I haven't played in a while. It didn't really stick with me.
Yeah.
I liked the real time. Like, the real time aspect of it was kind of cool. But it almost felt like there was too much micromanagement.
Yeah.
Again, and Greg, I think you've played that before too, right? Sins of Solar Empire?
Not that one. Like Star Drive.
Star Drive, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's also another similar one. I actually backed that one on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
My problem with Star Drive was that the ship customization was too in-depth.
Really? I spent so much time customizing ships. I loved it.
Yeah, and like it's cool when you're at a smaller scale, but then when you're at this scale, you're like eventually like I don't care. Click the button.
I can't care.
Lasers. Great. Good enough. Go out to war.
Paint it blue, send it out.
But the thing I liked about this is it's still very much, even though they call it a grand strategy game, it's still very much heavily a 4X game, and so you can definitely see the cross between Master of Orion and Crusader Kings. Like they brought in the standard 4X elements of like, oh, there's a tech tree, there are resources that you need to build up, you unlock new technologies and upgrade your ships. Like there's that clear progression path that you get. Another thing that this game does actually very unique is that there actually isn't a tech tree. It is a technology deck of cards. And so you research a technology, and once you do that, you shuffle the deck, and you put new technologies in based on what you just researched. And so your progression path can be determined by just random chance. Like, oh, I was intending to be warlike this game with my militarist species, but I can't figure out how to upgrade my missiles because it's not giving me the option. There are back-end things, like if you are militarist, it will try to give you more of a kind of a leaning towards those technologies to show up, but there have been games where it's like, all right, the nerd frogs are gonna go to war, and now it's like, oh, actually, no, we're really good at diplomacy now, so we're gonna talk to these bird people, and now we have a federation, and it's like, okay, well, the Dupa Directive has its new goals. Yeah.
Do they like handle that, like that dichotomy in the dialogue? Like do they actually embrace that and be like, oh yeah, this is weird? Like do the characters like?
So they're aware of the fact that you're a militarist, and they're like, hey, we don't like your aggressive tendencies, but eventually you butter them up enough, or you gain enough trust where they're like, yeah, you know what, that'd be great to be in alliance with you because you are warlike sort of, so we'll be friends.
You can fight for it.
Yeah.
So I think they hired one of the leads from Feel Better Games from Sunless Sea and
Okay.
London, and they're supposed to be writing encounters, like more of those mini encounters. Do you know if that's like out yet?
I don't think it's out yet. They've done a lot of stuff to clean up a lot of the UI because the first release of this game had a lot of stuff that just wasn't shown at all. And it was like really important information. It's like, oh, there was a fleet battle, but it didn't tell you who won or lost, or like how you won or lost. So it's like a fleet battle happened and it's over. And it's just like, oh.
Any questions?
Yeah, basically, it's like, and I've zoomed to the flames. Like, who won? Is there? Okay, I guess I won because I'm still there. But how much did I win by? Did my ships work?
This concludes the briefing.
Yes. But so they did a lot of stuff like that, and now, basically, what they're working on now are like once you've settled into the galaxy, like there's this Wild West like blazing a trail through the galaxy, settling new planets portion where you're discovering the weird anomalies in space. Like, whoa, space is weird. What's this alien? Whoa. Eventually, it's all known, and it's like, all right, we did it. And then what the encounters that they're working on next are kind of planet-based encounters. So like, hey, stuff's happening in your colonies, and you need to deal with those events as they come up. Otherwise, you will have new factions that show up, or you will, a nuclear explosion will go off and kill your planet. That's bad.
Are there oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Are there options? I know some of these games have like, you can determine the density of the universe. Like, there's this many opposite factions, or I want there to be few so that I can explore more.
Yep.
Do they do that?
Yep. No. Game creation, you have galaxy size, galaxy shape, number of stars, number of players, number of fallen empires, which are like the big roadblock thing. So you could be like in an old galaxy where everyone is like already much better at space than you, and you need to figure out how to deal with that. And you can create some really interesting scenarios that way.
Cool.
Do people talk about scenarios?
Yeah, and there are a bunch of mods for this game too, where people are like, hey, I made this custom galaxy with these setups, and it's like, hey, try to see if you can beat this.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, damn.
You're blind frog people. Go.
It's just a black screen.
This is tough. This is definitely tough.
Yeah.
Croak.
Ribbit. It's riveting. All right. On that note, yeah, thank you guys. I know I spewed a lot of words about this game.
Yeah, thanks, Dave.